Wealth is supposed to mean freedom. Power is supposed to mean choice. But for the daughters of the Medici family, it meant something else entirely. They were born into one of the richest and most powerful dynasties in Europe. Yet their lives were decided before they could refuse: who they would marry, where they would live, and whether they would ever have a say at all. And the most unsettling part is this: none of it was considered wrong. In fact, it was considered necessary. To understand what happened to the Medici daughters, you first have to understand how the Medici understood power. Power to them was not emotional. It was not personal. It was structural. The Medici family rose and survived by control. Not control through violence, but control through structure, reputation, and planning across generations. Every decision inside the family served a single purpose: to protect the dynasty. Sons were raised to hold power. They inherited titles, offices, influence, and authority. Daughters were raised to secure that power. They were not seen as individuals with open futures. They were seen as connections waiting to be used. Marriage, religion, obedience, silence. These were not moral expectations. They were strategic tools. From the Medici perspective, allowing daughters personal freedom was not kindness. It was danger. Choice introduced unpredictability, and unpredictability threatened survival. So choice was removed, calmly, deliberately, and without apology. Not because the Medici believed they were cruel, but because they believed they were responsible. For Medici daughters, choice was not taken away later in life. It never existed. From early childhood, their futures were discussed in rooms they were never allowed to enter. Conversations happened quietly, strategically, and without their presence. Marriage alliances, religious placements, political relocations. These decisions were made years in advance, sometimes before a girl could fully understand language, let alone destiny. Their education reflected this reality. They were taught how to read, but not how to argue, how to behave, but not how to decide, how to speak gracefully, but not how to object. Religion reinforced humility. Etiquette reinforced restraint. Silence reinforced survival. Affection existed, but only within carefully defined limits. A daughter who asked too many questions was gently corrected. A daughter who resisted expectations was redirected, sometimes firmly. By the time a Medici girl was old enough to understand what marriage or convent life truly meant, those decisions had already been negotiated between men. Not with her participation, without her consent. Choice was not removed, it was excluded from the beginning. Marriage was the most visible way Medici daughters were used, and the easiest for history to misunderstand. These marriages were not about companionship, they were about leverage. A Medici daughter could be promised years in advance to secure alliances that had nothing to do with her personality, desires, or safety. Sometimes the political value of a marriage mattered more than its outcome. When the time came, she was sent away, often to foreign courts, to unfamiliar customs, to languages she did not yet speak fluently. Adaptation was not encouraged, it was required. Loneliness was irrelevant. Homesickness was weakness. Public composure was expected. Her role was defined clearly and narrowly. Remain loyal, protect Medici interests, produce heirs. If she succeeded, she was praised quietly and then forgotten. If she struggled, she endured silently. Marriage did not elevate her status. It reassigned her function. Not every Medici daughter was married. When marriage was unnecessary, inconvenient, or financially impractical, the convent became the solution. This decision was often framed as spiritual. In reality, it was strategic. Convents removed daughters from inheritance disputes. They reduced the cost of dowries. They simplified dynastic planning. Many girls entered convents young, sometimes before they fully understood what permanent vows meant. The promise of faith was emphasized. The permanence of confinement was not. Officially, vows were voluntary. In practice, family pressure made refusal nearly impossible. Leaving required permission. Permission rarely came. Once inside, a daughter's role was considered complete. Her future no longer complicated the dynasty. Marriage did not restore freedom, it transferred ownership. Once married, a Medici daughter's body became part of dynastic planning. Pregnancy was expected, repeated pregnancy was encouraged. Childbearing was not a personal experience, it was a political obligation. Childbirth was dangerous, but danger was accepted as necessary. A daughter who produced heirs gained influence and protection. A daughter who could not slowly lost both. Health complications were endured quietly. Miscarriages were mourned and counted. Her body was no longer her own. It was political infrastructure. One of the few places Medici daughters appear in their own voices is in private letters, and what those letters reveal is unsettling. Publicly, their words were polite, grateful, obedient. Privately, a different pattern emerges. Illness appears again and again. Requests for permission, requests for visits, requests that go unanswered. What stands out is not rebellion. It is restraint. These women did not accuse, they did not protest. They asked carefully, because they understood something deeply unsettling. Open resistance would not free them. It would only remove protection. This was not silence caused by ignorance. It was silence shaped by consequence. Many Medici daughters were highly educated by the standards of their time. They read philosophy. They followed political developments. They understood diplomacy and court etiquette. But education did not grant authority. They advised discreetly, often behind closed doors. They influenced privately, never publicly. Public power remained male. Visibility was dangerous. Obedience was protection. Knowledge did not make them powerful. It made them useful, as long as they remained silent. For the Medici family, daughters were valuable, but only while they functioned. When a daughter failed to produce heirs or became politically inconvenient, her status changed. Quietly, visitors became fewer, influence declined, support weakened. This is why many daughters disappear suddenly from records, not through punishment, but through neglect. Power did not need violence, it simply withdrew, and withdrawal was enough. Silence was not weakness, it was survival. A Medici daughter who complained publicly embarrassed the family. A daughter who resisted openly risked isolation, confinement, or abandonment. So compliance became strategy. Letters were carefully written. Gratitude was expressed. Praise was performed. Even suffering, when it existed, stayed hidden. That silence shaped the historical record we inherit today. Once a Medici daughter fulfilled her role, history often stopped following her. She became a wife in another land, or a nun behind stone walls. Her name appeared less frequently. Her influence faded quietly. Not because she was unimportant, but because her function was complete. History remembers rulers, not the systems that sustained them. What makes this story unsettling is not that it was rare, it was normal. Across Europe, elite families operated this way. The Medici were not uniquely cruel, they were exceptionally powerful. Power made their system visible. No laws were broken, no customs were violated, and yet lives were shaped without consent. The Medici daughters were not powerless because they were weak. They were powerless because power required it. They lived surrounded by wealth, yet denied ownership of their own futures. Power does not always need violence. Sometimes it simply decides and expects silence in return. That is what the Medici family did to their daughters.